Let's face it, liberals are offended by everything.
Right on.
And they have zero sense of humor.
Right on.
Huh?
Right on. It's the party game that pokes fun at political correctness and liberalism run amok.
But making fun of them is hilarious for the rest of us.
So play right on and mock the progressive left and their fake news media counterparts in a variety of categories, such as race hustle, the wussification of America, earth snobs, Islam abomination, Hollywood hypocrites, and campus coddling. Feminism follies and rainbow games, and don't forget, millennial entitlement and many others.
Right on, created by conservatives for conservatives.
Because mocking the left feels so right on.
Give the gift of all year long by going to RightOnGame.com.
That's RightOnGame.com. Use promo code MOJO50 for a 10% discount. That's RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off.
And while you're there, check out the new drinking game option.
Warning, microaggressions contained in this box. Millennials and snowflakes will be offended by its contents. Retreating to safe spaces are highly recommended.
RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off. RightOnGame.com.
You can't handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. Seat over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress. Mike Charlie, 4 tree 5, 9er 2-1. Grid to mark. Mike Charlie, 4-7 tree 9er, 8-9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck. 2 rounds AGPT. Gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Denise Simon Experience. One thing that's really left the headlines was a vote that happened, I think about, a week or 10 days ago, where we had this piece of legislation. I'm not sure. Maybe it was a resolution about infanticide, and 44 Democrats, if I'm not mistaken, voted against it. So what did I do? I called on my friend Rachel Bovard, who, what does she do? She runs up and down the hallways of the Hill, kind of stepping on toes and kicking people in the shins to see what's being said out there. So welcome, Rachel, to the Denise Simon Experience.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
What? This has left the headlines. It's got to be back in the headlines. Are you making sure that happens?
Yeah, the pro-life movement needs to be focused on this issue because, to put it in stark terms, what the Senate Democrats did last Monday was vote for infanticide. This was a bill, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. All it said was that if a baby is born alive after an attempted abortion, a physician should give medical care and attention to that child just like they would any other child. Full stop. That was all the bill said, and you had 44 Senate Democrats that voted against that. So to put it frankly, they voted for having that baby be terminated.
There on Fox, there was this particular doctor who was an OBGYN who's been interviewed a couple of times. I think he's from one of the southern states, who's performed, I think, over 1,000 abortions. And he lost his young daughter in a bicycle accident that was hit by a car. And he went back to the practice and did the next abortion. Then all of a sudden he started, and this was midterm, not late term, and he had to start counting body parts, which is a procedural thing to do. And he just said, you have to kind of put a fetus back together again. I listened to this interview and it's haunted me ever since. I really believe that this So he quit. He's quit doing abortions, period. End of report. I really think there needs to be some kind of a hearing on this for two reasons. One is a physician takes a Hippocratic oath. They have to save a person, period. They have to save a live person with all the tools and medical technology that there is. And the other piece is, Rachel, I mean, this is almost like wrongful death, isn't it? Is it not? Or am I just overstating all of this?
Well, it's interesting because the abortionist Kermit Gosnell, who basically ran a house of horrors in Pennsylvania, is serving 3 life sentences for the murder of 2 babies born alive in his clinic, as well as the the wrongful death of a woman who died in his care who was receiving an abortion. So, it's Democrats like to pick and choose. They get to pick and choose when a life is a life, as opposed to conservatives like myself who believe that life begins at conception no matter, what the outcome of that life is. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very telling to hear the excuses that Democrats made. I think it gives you an idea of the smoke screens they try and hide behind. They tried to tell us it was about women's health, which obviously is false. This is about a newborn baby. This isn't even about the unborn child at this point. This is about a baby who has been born, has nothing to do with women's health. They tried to tell us that, this was an incredibly rare thing, that this doesn't happen. And again, statistics do not back that up. We saw 11 babies born alive after attempted abortions just last year in Florida. And other states report similar data. And then finally, they tried to tell us it was about, late-term abortions, they don't ever really happen. Again, this isn't about abortion. This is about when the baby is born. But even to that point, there were 5,000 late-term abortions in the United States in 2018. And the Pro-Choice Guttmacher Institute put out a research report showing they surveyed women in their clinics. Women did not seek those late-term abortions because of fetal abnormality or their own health. They sought it for convenience. So all these Democrat talking points are just smokescreens for the fact that they voted for infanticide, and they have now put themselves on the record. They do not support abortion that is safe, legal, and rare as they used to. They now support unlimited, unregulated, and accessible abortion at all times.
You just used the term safe, legal, and rare, which was the ruling or the text of the Roe versus Wade case, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And for a long time, that's what the Democrat Party said they stood for. In the Clinton years, they said we're for abortions, but they should be safe, legal, and rare. That is not the Democrat Party anymore. They have evolved into a hugely progressive party that basically supports abortion up until birth. And that's a tremendous transformation from a party who, again, was this party of safe, legal, and rare abortion just 20 years ago.
And yet they are against the death penalty. And this is a death penalty. Right. No,
again, it goes back to this idea that Democrats get to pick and choose when a life is worth saving, or when someone has, quote unquote, has enough dignity to compel or to deserve a life. And that is just the opposite approach that a lot of conservatives take. And I think that was no more apparent than Monday night with this vote.
Okay, so running up and down the hallways, what are they are they talking, or any of the Republicans or the Democrats talking about this still? I mean, is it any kind of a live water cooler topic, or have they kind of moved on to other scandals?
Yeah, they are trying to move on, obviously, both Republicans and Democrats, but I think it's incumbent upon pro-life conservatives not to let them. It was good that Republican leadership, Mitch McConnell, put this on the floor. I think he should be congratulated for that. But this is all he's planning to do on the issue. And I do think that this issue and other pro-life issues deserve more floor time than they get. This Republican majority in the Senate and the House, they had 2 years of unified government control of both houses of Congress and the White House, and they gave us very little in the way of pro-life votes. They should continue to push this issue, and people who care about it should continue to push them on it.
It's really just a remarkable moment. I think it's probably the largest single failing of the Democrat Party. And I hope that, you know, it is put in the quiver as an arrow going into 2020, because, you know, all of those that are in the House are up for re-election, some in the Senate, and then obviously the presidential campaign. We cannot let this die. Is the Freedom Caucus got something else out that they can put out, or is this just a whole kind of Senate thing?
Well, because Republicans have the majority in the Senate, it is definitely more of a Senate play. Republicans in the Senate control the floor. They control what bills come to the floor. Republicans in the House don't have that luxury while they're in the minority. So again, the pressure, you know, for purpose on this issue has to really start in the Senate. That is where Republicans are in charge.
All right. I know the Trump administration has tried a couple of times to stop some funding or suspend funding going into Planned Parenthood. Where are we on that?
The Trump administration has done significant work on this. They have issued 2 Title X regulations on this issue, restricting money from going to Planned Parenthood. I think it's telling that the strongest steps that have been taken on the pro-life issue have come from the White House. They have not come from Congress or Republicans in Congress. So, to the extent that the Trump administration has been active on this issue, they have been, definitely.
Okay, now I think I'm in a circle kind of money moving thing. Tell me if I'm wrong on this. So the federal government gives Planned Parenthood whatever monies it gives it a year. I don't know if it's $1 billion. I don't know if it's 200,000. I have no idea. But whatever that number is, Planned Parenthood says that money does not go to abortion. It goes to all these other services, or, you know, it goes to whatever it goes to. Yet Planned Parenthood, with monies, turns around and funds campaigns and makes campaign contributions to Democrats. So essentially, federal dollars are ending up going into Democrat campaign funds. Did I get some of that right?
Yeah, they will tell you they don't use federal funds for abortions, but it goes to this idea that money is fungible. Because they are getting money from the government, they are free to spend more money on abortions elsewhere. So it's a vicious cycle. The money they get from the government legally cannot be used for campaigns. But again, it goes to this idea that if you have money coming in, you free up funds to spend elsewhere. And that's the argument. I would also point out that Planned Parenthood has a multi-million-dollar budget. They do not need money from the government. They can achieve their purpose just fine. They're doing just fine financially. So it goes to this idea that, if the government wants to provide funds for women's health, they should be providing it to community health centers and other in crisis pregnancy centers and other women's health centers that do not advocate or provide access to abortion.
Does Planned Parenthood operate centers under some other name besides Planned Parenthood? I mean, do they have some kind of, other clinics, abortion locations that don't have a Planned Parenthood marquee sign on its roof?
They do have affiliate centers throughout the country that don't necessarily have Planned Parenthood, listed on their headline, but they do receive funds. But you'll usually find some affiliation on the center's website if they have it.
Okay, so we've got a handful of states here that obviously are allowing, and more coming on. I think Chicago or Illinois just came out with their legislature with a piece of, a bill that says that they are going to be the next state that would allow live abortions, and that Chicago wants to be the abortion capital of the country. So if the Trump administration and or the Department of Justice and Health and Human Services or whatever other cockamamie agencies need to belong in this, I think they would stand a very good chance of suspending federal dollars going into Planned Parenthood of those states that perform and allow legislatively or legally live abortions. Help me with that one, Rachel.
Yeah, I think there is a case to be made there. A number of states, will sue the Trump administration over these new regulations, I'm sure. So It's a matter of sort of proceeding with caution, getting some parts of it litigated through the courts before you move on to others. But you have to give the Trump administration credit. I think there's a lot of people in Washington who would not have expected the Trump administration to be one of the most pro-life administrations we've had. He is actually taking more steps on this issue than even President either Bush took, probably the last pro-life president that we had. So they are making significant progress, and they're to be commended for that.
So between the Family Research Council and, Heritage and you guys over at Conservative Partnership, I would say, is the pressure still being applied to these Democrats? I mean, is there some kind of a spreadsheet with the red demerits on their names on this vote?
Yeah, I think it was very useful for the country, not to mention the conservative movement, to put Democrats on the record on this issue. I think people were paying attention. You saw the Marist poll come out shortly after the comments of Virginia's Democrat Governor Ralph
Northam,
and which is what sparked this controversy. He basically he described essentially what this process was on national radio. He said, yes, the baby would be delivered. Maybe it would be resuscitated. We'd keep the baby comfortable until the mother decided what to do, meaning the mother decided to kill the baby or keep it. That, I think, pulled the curtain back on how grotesque this process actually is. And as a result, you saw this tremendous national attention, and a Marist poll showed a 17-point swing between people who had formerly identified as pro-choice now saying that they were pro-life. That is not to be ignored. That is significant, especially in a normally stable population identification group. And I think it tells us as a movement that when we talk about what an abortion actually is, it shakes the earth, and we do get national attention for it. And I think putting people on the record on these issues can only help. Now, I will say, the pro-life movement needs to keep sustained pressure on Congress to ensure we have more of these votes, because without that, I don't think there will be any more.
So with this vote that obviously, it kind of fell on the floor, can there be some other measures, for instance, going after the American Medical Association or whatever, licensees there are for physicians, that these abortion doctors that perform live abortions have their license revoked? Can that be necessarily a piece of legislation?
Well, I think, what the movement is looking at as conscience protections for doctors where they currently don't exist. So right now, doctors do not have legal protection if they're asked to perform an abortion, but they conscientiously object to it. They say, no, that's not in keeping with my religious faith. I don't want to do that. They do not have legal protection in that instance. And so a number of members of Congress have proposed protections, normal protections that you'd see anywhere else in the medical field, to say for doctors who don't want to perform abortions, they don't have to. We can't even get that across the finish line, much less what you were talking about.
I see a lot of steps that can necessarily be taken so we can do this in piece parts to, again, embarrass a Democrat vote here. I'm just so blown away that it takes, you writing some articles in Heritage or the Family Research Council, and yet it's left television. It's not on nightly news anymore or any other news, cable news or anything else. How do we get it there? Do we just start trolling media outlets and saying, this is unacceptable? Where are we? I mean, I feel like I could start trolling, CNN. Could you?
Yeah, there was an interesting piece done by David Harciani, who's a reporter at the Federalist, and he looked at all of the major cable news outlets and leading online publications, and none of them covered this. So I think, we know that there's a bias, an institutional mainstream media bias against, the pro-life movement, and they also don't want to talk about the reality of abortions. But I think the more the pro-life movement puts that out there, the more they say, look, an abortion is killing a baby even up to after birth. That's what we've learned. That's flat out infanticide. We know that organizations like Planned Parenthood traffic in baby body parts. They do business on the babies that they terminate in utero. Things like that are very difficult to grapple with. And the more I think we put these issues out there in the public eye, the harder it will be for the mainstream media to continue to ignore it.
Two instances that happened on the same day that it was reported that there was a mother in India, I think it was, that gave birth to a boy that was 9 ounces. 9 ounces. And the baby was in an incubator for months and months and months, and it is a very happy, healthy, bouncing child now. That was the record for a boy. In Great Britain, a mother gave birth to a female at 8 ounces. So this tells you that this is not third term, this is second term births that still stand a chance. So, I mean, their argument, given those two instances, falls completely apart, Rachel. Are you like running up to Democrats' offices and putting Post-it notes on their doors going, shame on you, because, other countries are protecting, at least second term, births?
Yeah, I think it's something that should be pointed out. There's not that many countries in the world that have as lax abortion laws as we do, and that should be pointed out. Again, the Democrats are the self-professed party of science. These are the people who say they pray at the altar of science, and yet they refuse continually to acknowledge that the science of viability for babies is continuing to move forward. So babies can now survive outside the womb at very, very young ages, but the left refuses to talk about that.
Yeah, it's only good science when it talks about climate change, right?
Right.
And then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is now challenging us to not have any more kids because we eat too many hamburgers or something. I don't know how you deal with it day in and day out. I mean, with all the things that are going on the Hill, it's almost like you've got to be walking around with a handbag full of 3x5 cards based on who you pass in the hallway to, shove something in their face. Rachel, where does your tolerance level come from?
Hey, there's always a little bit of optimism that comes with working with good people. So Senator DeMint did this for a long time, so I take my inspiration from him.
Well, I hope that, you guys keep writing some articles and keep getting it out there. In the meantime, send it out as a press release, and maybe we can get back on TV to, kind of revisit this thing, because I can't shake it. I cannot shake that interview with that former abortion doctor and the reason why he quit. I mean, it has been with me every bit of 10 days. It was the most horrifying thing I'd actually heard. Thanks for the attention to this, Rachel, in a big way. I don't want to let it go. But there's so many other scandals. It's kind of like we get desensitized and we don't even know where to rate them anymore. But thank you, Miss Rachel Bovard. And ladies and gentlemen, there's more coming your way. So stay with us.
This is Don Newen with Cowboy Logic Radio, and I carry my Sig Sauer 9mm every day. It's like a MasterCard. I never leave home without it.
And I'm glad you do, given that you work in Atlanta every day, talking about a rough place to work.
Well, Donna, I would say that most of our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners not only own, but carry their weapons, too. It's just the thing to do nowadays.
So do I, Don. And we need to share with our listeners a fantastic weapons company, Tar River Arms. Oh, and I should mention, they were founded by United States Marine, enough said, right? Badass-o-matic.
TarRiverArms.com. That's TAR Riverarms.com.
Tar River Arms, America's first virtual gun store, makes it easier and more comfortable than ever to purchase your firearm online. And through 3D interactive experiences, you can even view and inspect that gun you're purchasing.
They even have weekly specials that eliminate shipping and broker fees, Donna. Great guns, great prices, and great service. And remember, Tar River Arms is veteran-owned and operated.
Don, would you expect anything less from a Marine?
No, ma'am.
At TarRiverArms.com, you can search by caliber, manufacturer, and firearm types. Revolvers, semi-automatic pistols, including your Seton, short-barrel rifles, long rifles, shotguns, and NFA silencers. They even have very hard-to-find products such as the H&K MP5. Totally badass.
Tar River Arms have some of the coolest high-end tactical weapons made, all at great prices.
TarRiverArms.com, U.S. Marine owned and operated.
Hoorah!
Hey, gang, did you know that the big cellular companies fund liberal causes and candidates, not Patriot Mobile?
You're correct, Donna. Did you know that the big mobile companies have spent over $100 million to elect liberal candidates? They also fund liberal causes, agendas, and organizations such as Planned Parenthood, not Patriot Mobile.
Here's how it works. You, our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners, pay your cell phone bill every month. Then Big Mobile takes your money and gives millions to liberal candidates who authorize subsidies to provide free cell service, Obama phones, to do-nothings who vote for more liberals so they can keep getting more free stuff that you pay for. Not Patriot Mobile.
So here's how you fight back. Switch to Patriot Mobile with unlimited plans starting as low as $20 a month and stop funding the big cellular companies.
Feel good about funding the right agendas. Every dollar you spend makes a statement. What message are you sending?
And it's easy to switch. You can even keep your same number, and they've got great nationwide coverage that includes Double D Ranch.
Visit them online at patriotmobile.com or call them at 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
And for any of the guilt-ridden liberals, that's 1-800-272-8746.
Created by conservatives for conservatives. Their name says it all. Patriot Mobile. Do it now. patriotmobile.com or 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
Ladies and gentlemen, what message are you sending?
And thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience. The Green New Deal, it's getting an awful lot of press. So what do? I call on one of my favorite organizations, and that's the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I think they do remarkable work. And so Marlow Lewis, who's a senior fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, I guess got the short straw today to join us on the Denise Simon Experience to discuss Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal, but come to find out it's really not hers. It was her chief of staff who lately is in a little bit of trouble. So with that, Marlow, thanks for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience.
Denise, I'm so glad to be with you. No, I drew the long straw, so.
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you. Thank you. All right, let me start off this way. This Green New Deal is not a piece of legislation. It's more like a almost a resolution that was presented.
Yeah.
And we have members of both houses that automatically jumped on this thing. And so I would argue that Mitch McConnell in the Senate should just turn it into a formal resolution. I think maybe Senator Markey already has, and vote on it. Let's see. Let's kind of shake the trees here. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yes. It's what's called a sense of Congress resolution, and these resolutions do not have the force of law, but they are used to influence public opinion and frame the terms of debate. and it will be, if it actually did pass, it would be cited in litigation. In other words, it would have legal implications, even though it's not a law, because in court, and there are lots of climate change lawsuits out there, the litigants would point to this and say, you see, aha, this is what Congress wants us to do. So if it were to pass, it would make waves in courts, even though it's not exactly a law in the sense that it's not legally binding on anyone. Now, as for bringing it to a vote in the Senate, that's what Mitch McConnell has proposed to do, although it's not clear when he's going to do it. But the interesting thing was that Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts, who is the Senate co-sponsor of the resolution, immediately denounced Mitch McConnell for trying to hold a sham vote. And there's no such thing. I mean, voting on legislation, which does include resolutions expressing the sense of Congress, is the very heart of the legislative process. That's what we elect people to do, is to go to Congress and vote on things. And so the real sham here is that people like Ed Markey and Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez are trying to use this piece of legislation as a political mobilization tool, and then not have to actually be accountable for it to the electorate by voting on it in the full light of day. Because, I mean, this is such an extreme proposal. I mean, the costs would be literally tens of trillions of dollars. I mean, by one estimate, it's $93 trillion over 12 years. And if the Democrats would actually, and right now, basically, well, at least seven declared Democratic candidates in the House and Senate, most of them are in the Senate, are sponsors of this. And if they actually voted for it, then they'd have to run on that record in the 2020 elections. And they don't want that political liability, but they want the political advantage of having introduced this as a propaganda tool to recruit activists to work for them in the 2020 elections. So they want to have their cake and eat it. And I think it's great that Mitch McConnell wants them to either, to put their money where their political money where their mouth is.
Yeah, where the rubber hits the road here. And, I argue with what the House is doing with Trump right now, rather dismissing the Mueller report and going ahead and doing their own little gig, is now government paid opposition research for the next election in 2020. So as a countermeasure, I believe that timing is everything in Washington, D.C., for McConnell to bring this resolution, the Green New Deal, to a vote would be a remarkable tit for tat. Is that overstated?
No, I don't think it is. There are only 11 co-sponsors of this in the Senate. There are many more in the House. Of course, the House is has a Democratic majority. So there are only 11 in the Senate, and that means that this thing would probably go down in flames in the Senate. And then the conservatives in the Senate and Trump, could run on this as this is what these Democratic, presidential candidates are for, and look, their own party won't even back them. But that's the reason why, we shouldn't turn over the keys to the kingdom to these people. Because they're asking for crazy things, like they want 100% of U.S. power demand to be met by zero-emission energy by the year 2030. And so that means literally trillions of dollars already invested over many decades in our electricity provision system would have to be dismantled. And so those are costs that would have to be absorbed by ratepayers. And then there would be this tremendous expense to scale up wind and solar, which now supply, I've forgotten the exact percentage, it's something like 11% of our electricity. Have to scale that up to at least 50% or maybe 75%, who knows, all in 12 years. And that's just the electric sector component of the Green New Deal. They also want to achieve very rapidly a zero-emission U.S. transport system, and somehow they think that's going to be achieved through constructing networks of high-speed rail all over the country. And we know what's happened in California. Even California decided that it couldn't afford
they pulled the plug.
The high-speed rail, right? I mean, because the cost escalated from something like $33 billion, the original estimate, to over $77 billion. And so now they're building this, just a little tiny piece of it between Merced and Bakersfield, two smallish cities in the Central Valley. So the original plan was we're going to build it all the way from San Diego to San Francisco. And then they want okay. So it's this idea of remaking the U.S. electric supply, the U.S. energy system in 12 years, is bank breaking and controversial enough to sink this proposal. But then, because Ocasio-Cortez is a socialist, she wanted to include that with essentially, or tie that to also something like Medicare for all, and a guaranteed
Wages
job with a
yeah.
family sustaining wage for everybody, including presumably people at entry level jobs. She really doesn't understand how the economy works. Your McDonald's jobs are boast that, and I think with some justification, they're the best entry level jobs in the world, but when they're entry level, they're not enough to sustain a family of four. But they're great entry level jobs. So basically, if this actually were implemented as the way she's describing it, it would destroy hundreds of thousands of millions of entry level jobs, because no one could afford to pay people who are getting their first job what people would expect to be paid in their 30s. And and it just goes on and on. So, and also health care for all, high quality health care for all. So they're basically, what they're looking for there is a single payer socialized medicine scheme. So they threw this all in the pot with the pretense that somehow all these good things go together and would be mutually reinforcing. Why? Because progressives want all these things. So if we just put them all in a big pot and stir it, everything will work out fine. And forgetting the fact that this country has a national debt of $22 trillion, and adding another $93 trillion to that is not going to help America stay solvent, strong, prosperous, and free. So it's really out there.
Marlow, in the work that the Competitive Enterprise Institute does, has any of your associates there had any conversations with the Exxon people or the power companies to say, what are your thoughts at first glance on this Green New Deal?
No, I mean we don't have really any contact with ExxonMobil folks right now that I know of. Mm-hmm. But they are you see, look, some people think that the Green New Deal is a clever ploy, and I think some people are trying to use it as a clever strategy to drive conservatives and the Republican Party into a support of a carbon tax. They'll argue that, hey, you can't beat something with nothing. We have to have a more efficient, less costly alternative. And it's just I think it's just nonsense. Mm-hmm. Our alternative really is deregulation. Cut regulations, cut taxes, let the free market rip, mm-hmm. and we'll have an America that's energy dominant, prosperous, and highly resilient to anything that the climate has to throw at us. But we proved that this is nonsense back in the debate on the Waxman-Markey cap and trade bill. You may remember that. It was back in 2009. Yeah. The House actually passed the Waxman-Markey bill, and ExxonMobil, even back then, was saying you can't beat something with nothing, and they were saying, conservatives should support a carbon tax as an alternative to cap and trade. And we said no. What we're going to do is expose cap and trade as cap and tax, and we will defeat it. And we did. And that was really the most important reason why the Democrats lost control of the House in 2010, because they passed cap and trade, the Senate did not. And so what you found was that in almost all close House races in 2010, Democrats who voted for cap and trade lost. In the Senate, because they decided at the last minute not to vote on cap and trade, all Democrats in close races won re-election. So I think, cap and trade, the thing is that the Democrats really know that this is a serious liability for them, that anything that looks like taxes. But I think there are a lot of what I call Tweedledum Republicans who don't really get it, And so I think one of the big challenges that the Competitive Enterprise Institute now has, and other free market activist groups has, is in persuading these knee-shaking, frightened Republicans that they should just say no and not try to come up with a better Green New Deal. That's exactly what the Washington Post would want them to do.
Well, Washington kind of went into a meltdown when the Trump administration pulled out of the Paris Agreement. And so obviously the Democrats want to resurrect, some kind of climate change, something. And I think that piece parts of this resolution is their answer. So you've got, a handful in the Senate and certainly a lot more in the House that are grasping onto this thing. And the work is really the socialist part of it. I mean, it virtually turns every part of our culture upside down. I call it culture jamming. And
yes, I think you're right about that. In fact, I think that's, first of all, you're absolutely right that that the Green New Deal would require the United States to actually we're not officially out of the Paris Agreement yet, but the desire is to put us back in. But a lot of those same weak-kneed Republicans who think that a carbon tax is the smart middle ground, the responsible centrist position here, they also think we should get back into the Paris Climate Treaty, which I think is a very dangerous treaty, because they'll say, oh, it's non-binding, it's non-enforceable, except at the same time, they're telling us that the way we should implement it is through a carbon tax, which would be legally binding and enforceable, and actually all the Paris Treaty proponents are now making it clear, they sort of kept this hidden while they were negotiating this thing, that they all assume that the whole coalition of countries that have ratified the Paris Agreement will then try to enforce discipline with it through a global system of carbon taxes, and they call them border adjustments. So that if goods coming into your country are coming from another country that doesn't have an equivalent or have equivalent policies equal to your own carbon tax, then you'd put a carbon tariff on those goods coming in, and they try to sell this as a way to streamline government. This would somehow replace regulation. What they don't tell you is, and my friend Ben Zeiker, who works at an organization called the American Enterprise Institute, has really explains this beautifully in a monograph he wrote on this, is that, look, what would actually pass muster under international law if you had a system of border adjustments would be tariffs that applied to specific goods coming into your country based on the carbon content of their production. And so you can't just look at what the policies are in the other country. You actually have to engage in what's called a life cycle analysis of the production process. And as we know, production processes change all the time. I mean, most goods in international trade originate in many countries. The components come from many countries. There are very complicated and extensive supply chains. Somebody would have to do the carbon audit on that, and those change. Those can change weekly or daily. It's like, okay, today we're going to source this material not from, Algeria, but from Tunisia, And so what you would need to actually enforce this system in a rational and methodical way would be a new IRS. We'd need a new IRS.
Global, global auditors.
We'd need one nationally, but then you'd have to have some kind of adjudicatory body for the world that would have the power to audit how your company made the product, where you got the materials, what production processes you used, what the carbon intensity of the energy supply. I mean, it would be a nightmare. If we think the IRS today is bad enough, an agency that has the power to turn your life upside down by auditing you, just based on your finances, imagine what would happen if we had another one that also did this for the carbon content of your business. And so all of this stuff is I mean, even if you assume the worst about climate change, I would argue this would still be a cure worse than the alleged disease.
The operative word here too is competitive. I mean, the United States ranks pretty high in competition for all industry sectors across the globe, and this would put us down several rungs in posture here, I would argue, because other countries, China, yeah, we'll sign on to it, and then China doesn't comply, right? So, I mean, you automatically elevate cheating countries, would you not?
I think that's a very powerful point, and I think that's one of the main reasons why President Trump decided to that he would withdraw the United States from the Paris Agreement, because he said, look, under the Paris Agreement, China doesn't have to reduce its emissions until 2030, and there's no
we'll be dead by then.
Yeah, and there's no promise as to how much they would do it. It's just that their emissions have to peak by 2030, whereas we would be signed up for what Obama pledged, which are pretty deep reductions. And as you say, those other countries, they don't have. I mean, look, in our country, if you violate any kind of environmental regulation, environmental groups have legal standing to sue you and take you to court. Who has legal standing to sue anyone in China to take
Russia,
the government to court?
Iran,
I mean, it's ridiculous.
India,
and then, yeah. And then the other point, another point I think that's complementary to the one you just made, is that one of the reasons why the U.S. is roaring back as a manufacturing power is that our energy prices are so much lower than they are in Europe and in Japan. And that's because our energy supply under Trump's policy has expanded. The bigger the supply in relation to the demand, the lower the price. And so it is a huge part of our competitive advantage in international trade, the fact that we have so much affordable energy. And so getting back into the Paris Agreement, even if we actually did very little in the way of legislating or regulating to comply with it, the very fact that we have obligated ourselves to somehow adhere to it means that there would be a whole new level of political risk that would be spread across every part of our economy, which involves investment in energy. And I think that's one reason, when Trump got elected, that's when the market, that's when jobs started to come roaring back. It was before he actually even started deregulating, and before he started cutting taxes. It's because the market expected those things to happen.
Correct.
And so it got the animal juices flowing, among the investors and entrepreneurs. And so if we get back into the Paris Agreement, it's, we're now once more back into a carbon-constrained world where we can expect energy prices to do only one thing, increase, and energy supply to do only one thing, decrease, and that itself would have a chilling effect on our economy and make us less competitive.
If McConnell actually brings this to the floor, whenever it may happen, the Senate floor, there would necessarily have to be a debate prior to a vote. So what gets introduced then are all the other things, the fuel standards, the drilling permits, the emissions, wages, cows, retrofitting buildings and whatnot. And I think there's a lot of those things that they don't even want to have mentioned. They're there.
Yes.
But I mean, I don't think they're really afraid of the vote. They're afraid of the exposure of the debate prior to the vote. Right?
Oh, I think that's right. I mean, I think they are afraid of that. They're also afraid of the vote because they would lose. But I think you're absolutely right. They don't want the spotlight shined on the particulars, like the upgrading of all existing buildings to achieve maximal energy efficiency. I mean, this is what we want. We want federal inspectors. Now, I mean, people, it's already such a hassle to make any kind of modification to a house or a building in this country. There are all kinds of, inspectors and permits that you have to go through. And all right, so and the thing is, as there was a great report, the report that I alluded to that estimated that it would cost $93 trillion over 12 years. By the way, that's by a group called the American Action Forum, and their president, Douglas Holtz-Eakin, was a director of the Congressional Budget Office. So this guy really understands budgets, and he's really solid, very credible. Anyway, so their report points out that this proposal to upgrade all existing buildings to achieve maximal energy efficiency is really redundant with their proposal to meet 100% of our power demand from zero-emission energy sources. I mean, if all the energy you're getting now it has zero net emissions, why do you need to reduce your consumption of energy for the sake of the climate? Because it's the emissions that allegedly are disrupting the climate. It's not the energy that's consumed that causes the emissions. So I mean, this is just, it's like an extra, I mean, and it's a huge component of the expense, and yet it would be totally unnecessary if you could actually achieve zero net emissions. So anyway, yeah, I mean, so that's a crazy proposal.
Mr. Marlow, Thomas, you've done a remarkable job here, kind of breaking things down. And I mean, most of us looked at, the 25 items or whatever it was on there, and we were already in shock when we just got to, we can't eat hamburgers 3 times a day anymore. And that, combustible engines have to go away. So we thank you, Mr. Marlow Lewis, Senior Fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. And ladies and gentlemen, I highly recommend that you trot on over to their website and follow them. They do remarkable work. I love getting the emails and love the expertise. And Mr. Marlow, thanks for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience. Ladies and gentlemen, there's more coming your way, so stay with us.
Hey, Donna, Cowboy Logic Radio listeners love law enforcement.
That's right, Don. And Charity Magnets designs and produces beautiful, high-quality products for law enforcement supporters and enthusiasts.
They've got very impressive honor badge car magnets.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got license plate honor badges.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got cool keychains and license plate frames.
CharityMagnets.com. I'm on their website right now, and this is my favorite, the Honor Badge dog tag. Look at that little doggy with the dog tag. He's so cute.
Donna, we're trying to do an ad read, and you're playing around on their website, which happens to be CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute.
Donna.
Okay. Hey, this is huge, too. For each sale, a donation will be made to Cops for Kids with Cancer. Cops for Kids with Cancer has given more than $2.5 million in donations. Yes.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Like Donna is doing right now, go to CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute. All right, use the promo code MOJO for $5 off any purchase. I know you all love and support our brave law enforcement professionals and their families. Show your support today by going to CharityMagnets.com and check out that little puppy. He's so cute. Hey, Don, can we go to the pound, get another rescue dog, please? Pretty
No,
please?
Donna, no. 5 rescue dogs are enough, but I'm going to CharityMagnets.com, and I'm making some purchases right now.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Enter MOJO at checkout and get $5 off. CharityMagnets.com.
Let's face it, liberals are offended by everything.
Right on.
And they have zero sense of humor.
Right on.
Huh?
Right on. It's the party game that pokes fun at political correctness and liberalism run amok.
But making fun of them is hilarious for the rest of us.
So play right on and mock the progressive left and their fake news media counterparts in a variety of categories, such as race hustle, the wussification of America, earth snobs, Islam abomination, Hollywood hypocrites, and campus coddling. Feminism follies and rainbow games, and don't forget millennial entitlement and many others.
Right on, created by conservatives for conservatives.
Because mocking the left feels so right on.
Give the gift of all year long by going to RightOnGame.com.
That's RightOnGame.com. Use promo code MOJO50 for a 10% discount. That's RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off.
And while you're there, check out the new drinking game option.
Warning, microaggressions contained in this box. Millennials and snowflakes will be offended by its contents. Retreating to safe spaces are highly recommended.
RightOnGame.com, promo code MOJO50 for 10% off. RightOnGame.com.
You can't handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. Seat over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress, Mike Charlie, 435-9er21. Grid to mark, Mike Charlie, 4739er, 89er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck, 2 rounds HEPT, gas TOT 53U.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
And thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. We're going to discuss a little bit here about censorship or First Amendment. And so what do? I go trot on over to Pacific Legal Foundation, and Ethan Blevins, who has been with us before, poor guy got the short straw on this one, but he's agreed to join us to talk about this. Previously, we had talked about a case, I think, in Minnesota. I think it was the Mansky case where you can't wear certain things when you go vote. You can't wear certain things when you go vote. Well, Texas apparently didn't get the memo. Is that right, Mr. Ethan? Welcome to the Denise Simon Experience.
Thanks, Denise. Yeah, so this is very similar to the Minnesota case, and there's actually quite a few states who have laws like this that prohibit you from wearing certain political apparel or signs or things to the polling place that might be related to a candidate.
Okay, but in one of the people in Texas was wearing a firefighter's T-shirt. It wasn't political at all, right?
Right. Yeah. So the law in Texas says that you're not allowed to wear political badges and et cetera and so on that are relating to a candidate, measure, or political party. And the problem with that is that that's so vague and general that an election worker couldn't just decide whatever that might mean. So in one of our clients' situations, Jillian, who you mentioned, she wore a Houston firefighters T-shirt to vote. Her husband is a Houston firefighter, and she was told she had to turn that shirt inside out before she could vote because firefighter pay was one of the issues on the ballot. And so, these election workers have a lot of discretion just to decide what is okay and what is not okay. And that it sort of creates a situation that's ripe for things like viewpoint discrimination or censorship that really isn't within the actual interests of the state in preventing, intimidation or fraud or something like that at the polling place.
In the First Amendment, I know there's been lots of court cases on the First Amendment, but is free speech the same thing as free expression?
Yes, for the most part, those are kind of synonymous. So your right to say something verbally or in writing is about the same as your right to, wear something that's artistic or, paint a picture. Those are generally synonymous.
All right, and so, like in the case of Mansky in Minnesota, when a decision is rendered, which was favorable to Mansky against the Minnesota Election Board or whatever it was, do other state legislatures pay attention to that, or do they just kind of, they're ignorant of it, and we just kind of rock along, and then you have to do this thing case by case?
Well, there is some awareness, and after Mansky, I think there was some training done of election workers to make them aware of it. I'm not sure if that occurred in Texas or not, but it certainly occurred in some places. So there's some awareness, but then again, it seems like these Texas election workers weren't really aware of the Mansky decision or what it meant, and so that is an ongoing problem. So you have to kind of enforce something. Once you get a ruling from the Supreme Court, you have to go out and enforce it against other government entities that either don't know about it or don't care about it.
So in the case of Texas, is Pacific Legal working to have the law stricken, or is it working to have the law more defined and more absolute?
So we're kind of seeking both, either or. So we're challenging the law on its face, which means that we don't think it could be applied in any way that would be constitutional, which means it would have to be invalidated. But we're also kind of as an alternative saying, this as it's being applied by these election workers, it's unconstitutional, and so it needs to be reined in a little bit. So it's a little bit of both. We think it's unconstitutional as a whole, but another alternative would be to kind of just make it a little bit clearer.
Okay, now draw the distinction for us, if you will. Corporations can practice censorship, if you will, or anything against free speech all day long, but law cannot. Is that right?
That's basically right, at least under the First Amendment. The First Amendment applies against the government. So if, for example, Twitter or another private social media organization chooses to, boot somebody from its service, that's generally not going to be a First Amendment problem unless the corporation is somehow acting on behalf of the government or is acting like some kind of government entity. Otherwise, you'd have to look at other laws that might prohibit a private party from doing something like that.
So in the case of, say, Facebook, where Facebook does coordinate from time to time with law enforcement and other government agencies, along with maybe perhaps other social media in the case of Twitter, because of things that get posted on Twitter by jihadis and whatever else. There's kind of a fine line on what corporations can do when it comes to First Amendment and can't do, but government can't do it at all.
That's right, yeah. So in a situation where a corporation like Facebook is coordinating with a government entity, then there'd be an issue as to whether we're going to consider the First Amendment applicable to that situation. And there's actually a case before the Supreme Court now about television broadcasters and whether granting them a monopoly right makes them like a government actor, and they can't discriminate based on the content that people want to show. So, it's a little bit nuanced, but generally, yeah, the First Amendment's only against the government itself.
Whether it be state or federal or local, correct?
State, federal, or local, that's right.
Okay. So the case in Texas, where, one was wearing a Make America Great Again hat and the other one was wearing a firefighter's t-shirt. How old is this particular case? This happened in 2016?
Oh, well, the Texas case was just filed very recently in the last week or so. The Minnesota case is a little bit older.
Okay.
But that was resolved by the U.S. Supreme Court already.
Were these two people allowed to vote in the end?
Only after complying, basically, with the election workers' requirements. So, in the case of Tony Ortiz, he came to the polls wearing his "Make America Great Again" hat, was pulled out of line, said he couldn't wear that, and he said, "Well, this isn't related to anything on the ballot. Trump's not on the ballot, et cetera." And the election worker insisted that he had to take it off and threatened to call the police on him. And he was able to later in the day go without his hat and vote. And Jillian, who's wearing the Houston firefighter shirt, did comply and was able to vote. But you shouldn't have to decide between, your T-shirt and your vote. You can express yourself at the polls without, disrupting the election, and cast your ballot while also expressing your political viewpoint.
Okay, but Ethan, here's the deal. A vote is free expression. A vote is free speech into itself. So you can't do one thing of free speech, but you can do the other if you comply and obey in one side, then you can practice your free speech on the other side, right? I mean, we're like
one or the other.
Political surgeons here. We're having to dissect these things.
Yeah, so I mean, usually the government's excuse is that they want the polling place to be sort of this sacrosanct environment where you're not being intimidated or hassled by anybody. But even if that's a legitimate government interest, which you could debate, just wearing a hat or wearing a shirt is not going to disrupt the right of other people to go ahead and cast their vote.
What is it the Texas Election Commission that is holding firm on this, that's actually being sued, or is it the Texas legislature?
So the defendants are the counties that actually administer the elections, and then the state itself, because it's a state law. But because the counties are the ones that are actually enforcing it, they're defendants as well, because their election workers were the ones that censored Jillian and Tony at the polls.
Where in the process is this particular case? I mean, are we at the beginning or in the middle, or where are we? What's the process?
So we pretty much filed a week ago, and we will be waiting a little bit to hear back from the state. They'll file an answer, or they'll file a motion to dismiss where they say, hey, these people are out to lunch, you should dismiss this case. It's going to take a little bit of time, but because we probably don't need to, go to a jury trial, we'll have a court decide whether the government can prevent people from wearing a pretty innocent, passive political apparel to the polls, or in Jillian's case, not even political at all. So it'll take a little while. Hopefully by the end of the year, we would have some kind of decision from the trial court.
And this is a Texas court, correct?
Yes, this is a federal court in Texas.
All right. Now, the polling places, what is it, 200? You can't have any political messaging or candidates within, 200 feet or whatever it is of the polling place. But if you pull your vehicle in that you drove to the polling place and it's got bumper stickers all over it, is that too, part of this kind of, would it affect something like that?
Yeah, potentially if it's within, so it's 100-foot buffer in the case of Texas, but different states have different laws. And that's part of you raise a great concern, which is even if we say the polling place, that's a really sacred place. We're not going to let anybody say anything that might, hurt anybody's feelings inside the polling place. Well, anything within 100 feet of the polling place. We got sidewalks, we have parking lots, we have people just walking by, living their normal lives. And, that kind of space is traditionally the most protected space for free speech, because the government doesn't have any valid reason to make you to censor you when you're just in an open public space like that. So that's one aspect of the Texas law that's really concerning, is that it extends outside the polling place.
This has a lot of ramifications. The truck is wearing a bumper sticker. somebody's walking their dog in front of the polling place and the dog's got, some MAGA scarf around its neck. Or, a kid's riding his bicycle and he's got, don't tread on me flag on the bicycle handlebars. I mean, so it would take, I guess, a lot to redefine the law or scrap it all together.
Yeah, that this comes up sometimes where a court has to decide, can it interpret the law in a way that makes it okay, or would that just be putting words in the legislature's mouth? And our position here would be is you can't really rewrite this thing. The whole thing has to go, because it's pretty clear that within 100 feet, you can't put anything on yourself that relates to a candidate, measure, or political party. And, that could be anything. If a candidate spoke on that issue, is wearing something related to that issue relating to the candidate, I think an election worker could decide that is the case. So it seems like there's just no way to get around it.
Well, obviously there was some kind of training for these election or poll workers, such that the poll workers were advised to be on the lookout for. But is there an opportunity to go look and see what was actually in that training manual for these poll workers to even be aware of the do's and don'ts?
Definitely, and we will be able to see that in the course of this litigation. And you're right, they do receive training. We don't know what the scope of that is yet. But even, one of the points that the Supreme Court made in the Mansky case is you can't train these poll workers sufficiently to figure out what these laws mean. No matter how well trained they are, they can't keep an index of every issue on the ballot in their heads while they're doing this work. And so it's just unreasonable to expect that they'd be able to be adequately trained to actually enforce this in a fair way.
I mean, I'm beginning to think that if somebody shows up in a firefighter's t-shirt or a MAGA hat, that, they have to go through a separate door and they can go vote over here in the corner in the dark. And then everybody else that complies can vote in the normal, voting machines. I mean, I see. I'm not sure I know how that the Texas Election Commission can even defend what's on their books.
Yeah, I mean, their defense is going to be, as it was in the Minnesota case, well, we have an interest in preventing voters from feeling pressured, and so forth. But I mean, we're grown-ups. We're going to the polls with our ideas. Nobody's gonna change that at the last minute.
Well, who cares if somebody does change somebody else's mind? I mean, that guy made the decision, right?
Well, that's right. That is the point of having free expression, is to persuade each other, right? Yeah.
So, is it going to get to the point? I mean, is it to the point now that you can't talk to the person in front of you in line or behind you in line because you may not be wearing anything, but you can unduly pressure somebody by just having a conversation. So, I mean, would there be verbal censorship that applies here?
Verbal censorship would not apply here, which is one reason that why the law is kind of irrational, because if that's really your concern, it seems like a T-shirt that says "Enjoy capitalism" or whatever is going to be a lot less disruptive than somebody preaching to you about voting for such and such a candidate, and yet that is not forbidden.
Okay, so a voting place is like a church assembly hall or some school thing, which are generally in neighborhoods, and so you got somebody that's outside of the the buffer zone, but they're playing some kind of a recording, and it's infecting the air. I mean, is it? I mean, would it apply in that situation?
It might potentially, if it falls under the definition of electioneering, which is prohibited by a separate provision in the Texas law. But if it's just loud noise, that probably could be regulated if it was done so in a neutral way, just to prevent noise or whatever. But if it was really based on the content, which is the problem with this law that we're dealing with here, then you'd have a different problem.
How many other states have this kind of thing? I mean, do essentially all 50, or and they're not necessarily enforced, or they are enforced? I mean, how many states? I mean, we're looking at 2 so far. You mentioned that there's a handful of others. I mean, are we talking about half or all?
I don't have it in front of me, but I believe a majority of states have something like this, but it's a range of, they vary. So the Texas law is a little different from the Minnesota one. And so some may be more objectionable than others. They just have to kind of be looked at, case by case basis.
These election officials, state by state, all attend election conferences, I would imagine. Do we know if that this kind of thing is brought up, that they take them back after they go to these conventions, election conventions, and there's a suggested amendment to the law? I mean, is it gone much broader that you're aware of?
I don't know to the extent that the sort of officials involved in elections have talked about Mansky and what it means for their individual states. I hope that conversation is ongoing. We may be able to find out some of that during the course of this Texas litigation, whether it came up in conversations either in Texas or, like you say, at a convention or something like that. But we don't have that information yet.
So you're still in the discovery phase.
Right. In fact, we haven't even quite started that yet. That'll probably start in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Yeah, so there's much to learn still, but regardless of what we find out, it's pretty clear that the law, by forbidding you from wearing a T-shirt or any apparel related to a candidate or a ballot measure, I mean, that could be anything. And as we saw here, something as innocent as a firefighter's T-shirt. So regardless of what turns up in discovery, the law just sweeps way too broadly.
I mean, it's like these polling places have become constitution-free zones when you go vote for something, it's not part of the, U.S. Constitution. It's part of the state constitution. So it's kind of to take a broad look at all of this, it's really a fascinating argument, isn't it, Ethan?
It is. We live in a day where the government feels like it really has to have these controlled environments, whether it's a campus or whether it's a polling place. And we need to push back against that because, it just creates the opportunity for the government to discriminate based on things it does not like you to say. It prevents people from being able to communicate their message. So it's important at the polling place, on campus, other government buildings across the country where or outside those buildings where we have a right to express ourselves, and the government wants to keep it quiet as much as it can.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ethan Blevins at Pacific Legal Foundation. Thanks so much, Ethan. We'll be looking forward to seeing the outcome of this one. And ladies and gentlemen, there's more coming your way, so make sure you stay with us.
This is Don Newen with Cowboy Logic Radio, and I carry my Sig Sauer 9mm every day. It's like a MasterCard. I never leave home without it.
And I'm glad you do, given that you work in Atlanta every day, talking about a rough place to work.
Well, Donna, I would say that most of our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners not only own, but carry their weapons too. It's just the thing to do nowadays.
So do I, Don. And we need to share with our listeners a fantastic weapons company, Tar River Arms. Oh, and I should mention, they were founded by United States Marine, enough said, right? Badass-o-matic.
TarRiverArms.com. That's TAR Riverarms.com.
Tar River Arms, America's first virtual gun store, makes it easier and more comfortable than ever to purchase your firearm online. And through 3D interactive experiences, you can even view and inspect that gun you're purchasing.
They even have weekly specials that eliminate shipping and broker fees, Donna. Great guns, great prices, and great service. And remember, Tar River Arms is veteran-owned and operated.
Don, would you expect anything less from a Marine?
No, ma'am.
At TarRiverArms.com, you can search by caliber, manufacturer, and firearm types. Revolvers, semi-automatic pistols, including your SIG, Don, short-barrel rifles, long rifles, shotguns, and NFA silencers. They even have very hard-to-find products such as the H&K MP5. Totally badass.
Tar River Arms have some of the coolest high-end tactical weapons made, all at great prices.
TarRiverArms.com, U.S. Marine owned and operated.
Hoorah!
Hey gang, did you know that the big cellular companies fund liberal causes and candidates, not Patriot Mobile?
You're correct, Donna. Did you know that the big mobile companies have spent over $100 million to elect liberal candidates? They also fund liberal causes, agendas, and organizations such as Planned Parenthood, not Patriot Mobile.
Here's how it works. You, our beloved Cowboy Logic Radio listeners, pay your cell phone bill every month. Then Big Mobile takes your money and gives millions to liberal candidates who authorize subsidies to provide free cell service, Obama phones, to do-nothings who vote for more liberals so they can keep getting more free stuff that you pay for. Not Patriot Mobile.
So here's how you fight back. Switch to Patriot Mobile with unlimited plans starting as low as $20 a month and stop funding the big cellular companies.
Feel good about funding the right agendas. Every dollar you spend makes a statement. What message are you sending?
And it's easy to switch. You can even keep your same number, and they've got great nationwide coverage that includes Double D Ranch.
Visit them online at patriotmobile.com or call them at 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
And for any of the guilt-ridden liberals, that's 1-800-272-8746.
Created by conservatives for conservatives. Their name says it all. Patriot Mobile. Do it now. patriotmobile.com or 1-800-A-PATRIOT.
Ladies and gentlemen, what message are you sending?
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for hanging with us on the Denise Simon Experience. Investigate. And I guess I can only think of two names, Adam Schiff and, Mr. whatever his name is.
Gerald Nadler.
Gerald. Hi, Seton Motley with lessgovernment.org.
Hey, how are you? That's one of my favorite nicknames of all time. I met former New York Senator Alphonse D'Amato, the last Republican New York will probably ever elect. And he, of course, Gerald Nadler, the congressman, is from New York as well, and he's very rotund. And
he had the surgery.
Well, he's still very pear-shaped. And Alphonse D'Amato called him the Waddler, which I thought, Gerald Waddler, which I thought was very funny. Anyway.
Okay, let me start off this way because you're exactly right with what you sent out in the email the other day. But here's the deal. With what Nadler is doing and Pelosi is allowing and Adam Schiff, I would argue instead of going outside the system and hiring Perkins Coie and then doing Fusion GPS and getting a dossier on Trump, now we're actually just going to do it in the face of America and use government dollars to create another dossier. Is that right?
Right. Yes, because if you'll recall, there was, the Republicans did run the House and Senate heading into the 2016 election. Trump has ripped the mask off of a bunch of people in a bunch of areas, and this is one of them. I mean, it's obscene that the entire Mueller special counsel investigation was in violation of the special counsel rules, because you're actually supposed to start out and say, we're investigating this crime, obstruction of justice, taking bribes. There has to be a specific crime cited. There was this amorphous allegation of collusion with Russia. Well, the word collusion only appears in criminal law statute in antitrust, meaning, 3 or 4 companies that run, that run the widget, that control 90% of the widget market. The 4 companies get together and collude and say, we're all going to raise our prices together.
Yeah, and then it goes to conspiracy.
That's the only collusion that exists in law. And this Russia collusion thing then had to be lowered to a national security investigation rather than a criminal investigation, which I believe is also in violation of the special counsel statute. And so this whole thing has been a joke and wrong and a hoax. There was no evidence to begin this thing. In America, we don't launch fact-free investigations into our political enemies or anyone else for that matter. We have facts and then go, okay, these facts require an investigation. You don't just investigate. Well, Nadler now, as they realize, they're getting signals, I think, from the Mueller team that there isn't anything in there having anything to do with Trump. So now he's not waiting. He's just cranking it up and just investigating everything about Trump, his businesses, his tax returns. I'd like to point out and begin that they're freaking out about getting his tax returns. If he didn't pay his taxes, don't you think the IRS would have made a point of it by now? I mean, it's not like the IRS is just sitting back going, okay, we're going to wait for Congress to do our auditing for us. No, if Trump had not
I
paid
think what Schiff and Nadler are trying to build is a RICO case. Right or wrong, I think that's where they're headed.
I think what they're trying to do, they've said obstruction of justice, which is a very hard case to make. The only thing they're pointing to of actual substance as far as obstruction of justice is he fired James Comey.
But then the Democrats wanted him fired.
As Dershowitz said, Alan Dershowitz, he goes, this is a guy, the President of the United States, firing an employee. He is completely allowed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It is not obstruction of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, in fact, there's very few things the president can do while president that would constitute obstruction of justice. But that seems to be the lead-off case or charge the Democrats want to investigate. And that the only weaker lead-off hitter than that was Michael Cohen as their first witness.
Nadler was kind of interesting on the Sunday talk shows because he was speaking to, and the reason I went to RICO is because he was actually speaking to corrupt Russians laundering money through the Trump organization. So that tells me that that's what they're necessarily trying to build.
Well, they've been alleging that going back to the 80s.
Correct.
Because what happened was, in fact, I watched an A&E, I think it was A&E, some special. It was like a 3-hour mini-series on the history of Donald Trump.
I did too. I watched these parts. Yeah.
Yeah, the first two parts weren't very anti-Trump. They just were like, okay, he did this, he did this, he did this. He was very successful in the 80s. And then when the wall fell, of course, the reason we have oligarchs in Russia post-Soviet Union is because, they issued stocks to rank and file regular Russian citizens in all the once publicly held utilities and all the publicly held things. And these people have been under communism for 100 years. They don't know what stocks are. Well, the ex-KGB guys do. So they go to these poor people who don't know what the heck they have in their hands and pay them pennies on the dollar for, and so the same 5 guys that were running Russia before are running Russia again.
Mm-hmm.
So they were making so much money they wanted to put it places. So the charge is Trump was taking Russian money to do his buildings and do his deals, and that may be true. That also may not. That doesn't make it illegal.
Well, and that's right, because we've got an awful lot of Russian money laundering experts in the Southern District of New York, because they were investigating Russian mafia in the Bronx for years and years and years. So,
right. And by the way, because Trump, we can't do this in a vacuum, although the Democrats will try desperately to do so. The fact that Mueller, 2+ years in, has 0 Russia collusion evidence totally blows up this theory. Because the theory that Nadler's working on now is he took Russia money, he's underwater to Russian investors, and therefore he's doing favors for Russia. Well, that's collusion, and we already know there isn't any collusion because Mueller can't find any. So this whole thing is obnoxious and completely without fact, and therefore doesn't warrant any sort of investigation whatsoever. And it's like the Beria quote I can never pronounce his first name, but Beria was the head of the Secret Service for Joe Stalin in the Soviet Union, and his famous quote is, "You show me the man, I'll find you the crime."
Right.
And that's what's happening to Trump again now. First it was with Mueller and Trump-Russia collusion. Now it's with Nadler and anything he's ever done in his life ever. It's really, it's totalitarian. It's banana republic third world. It has nothing to do with a representative republic, which is what we are.
I think in the end, while we've all learned that we're not supposed to like Mueller, because that's where many of the conservatives and the Republicans are, that we're not supposed to like Mueller and certainly his team. But I think in the end, because we're hearing rumors that his report is going to drop any day now, that we're actually going to be very satisfied that he did in fact.
I don't care if he comes out and says Donald Trump is the second coming of Gandhi. He had nothing to start with, and yet here we are with him still investigating 2+ years later. A man with actual integrity would have walked in the door, been handed this crap case, looked at it for maybe a couple of weeks, and come out and said, "There's nothing here. I'm done."
All right. I mean, that's fair enough. I'm of the notion actually that the Mueller report is going to embarrass Schiff and Nadler and Pelosi.
Well, that's going to happen in 2017.
Correct.
Not in the middle of 2019. If he had integrity, he would have killed the case almost immediately.
Well, but he would
have started out by saying this is actually in violation of the special counsel statute, and therefore this shouldn't even be started.
But the interesting thing is
that's what he would have done.
Trump is he's got a year or more to finesse all of this going into his reelection, correct?
What do you mean? Who? What do you mean finesse it?
Finesse the report, whatever is in it. I mean, he can use the report now as a weapon against the Democrats.
Well, again, you have way more confidence in Mueller than I do. I think he's coordinated with Nadler, and Nadler's telegraphing what's going to be in the report, because Nadler's going to say, Mueller's going to say, well, there wasn't collusion, but it looks like there may have been obstruction of justice, and there may have been some unseemly Russian money deals that should be looked at. Oh, and look, thank God, Nadler's already looking at those things. Thank goodness. I think Mueller should be in prison, but that's just me.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So let's go back to Schiff and Nadler. We're even seeing some Democrats that are pushing back very hard against the work that they're doing. I mean, what they're essentially doing is, paperwork warfare, right?
Well, did you see? Well, yeah. Well, they got a problem. They got the rank and file neophytes who are completely insane. Did you see whatever her name is, Tlaib, the freshman?
Yes.
She's announced that she's going to file impeachment this month.
Okay, that's fine. I'm good with that. I'm good with that because it never goes anywhere.
And I wrote extensively about this about how yes, Pelosi's insane and radical. Charismatic.
Yeah, I don't think she's stupid though. She could necessarily tamp this down.
Well, she can't. She can't. There's no way she wants Tlaib filing impeachment charges.
Correct.
There's no way. There's no way she wanted Ocasio-Cortez sprinting out front with the Green New Deal. There's simply no way. So she's got a real problem, and then it's not just these young Turks. Her real problem is most of her. There's no such thing as a moderate Democrat anymore.
Correct.
There's just Democrats representing moderate districts, and her problem is she's been successful at keeping these people from going radical left in order to win the majority and not get wiped out at the ballot box. The problem is with Ocasio-Cortez and Tlaib and Ilhan Omar completely way out on the limb, they're going to draw a bunch of Democrats out of their moderate hiding and go full left. And so she's going to try to tamp this down. I'm not sure how long she can keep the lid on it.
How do you think that Schiff and Nadler are going to take this thing all the way up? You know, they're going to take a year or more. I mean, we've got some.
Please.
Okay,
this is
go ahead.
I'm going to die of old age, and they're still going to be investigating him.
Now, what is the position here of Trump? Will the Democrats freak out when he applies executive privilege? So some of these people that have worked for him,
say, see, this just proves that he's got stuff to hide, and you know that's the advantage they have. And you know this is what we get from handing the freaking government over to these morons.
Well, but see, I don't want these people who necessarily can't afford to go hire some big, Washington D.C. inside Beltway lawyers
like Carter Page and Mike Flynn and all these guys.
Yeah. I mean, we've already seen that that's hurt them financially. And, at some point, I think Trump's going to have to take some interesting action. Is he getting good enough legal advice from White House counsel and outside counsel?
Rudy Giuliani, I mean, the White House counsel, the actual official position, the White House counsel, has a lot of other crap with which to deal besides, this external nonsense. He's got an actual job as the White House counsel.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I think the lead guy on this kind of crap is Giuliani. And I'm not entirely confident he's getting the best legal representation as far as this is concerned. He's made some serious flubs.
He has.
On television and elsewhere. Yes.
He has.
So,
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, so I'd like him. Trump doesn't know. It's the same thing he's experienced throughout his entire administration. He's not a career government guy. He doesn't have 9,000 people waiting to join his administration. He's stuck with the few people he knows, and he knows Giuliani. Giuliani may not be the absolute best guy for this gig.
I'm of the notion there's a lot more arrows in his quiver that he could be using as countermeasures, and I'm not seeing them. And
he
that
may be waiting. I think I hope you're right, and if you're right, now would be the time to use them because we're not even we're coming out of this 2-year plus nonsense on obstruction of justice. I mean of the Mueller investigation, and now they launch with 81 different people getting letters from without and Nadler had one of the most totalitarian quotes I've ever heard. He goes, "We don't have the facts. We gotta find the facts." Well, you don't start. No, that's backwards. That's the cart before the horse.
Mm-hmm.
So I think now would be the time to say you're not doing an 81 person to start fishing expedition. You're done.
Mm-hmm.
You're just done.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got something actually. I've done nothing. When I've done something, you can do this, but you can't just go on a ocean-wide fishing expedition at my expense. So no.
I would say that some of these Democrats don't have clean houses. Obviously, we're waiting for some kind of action to be taken against Ilhan Omar, and we seem to be having.
Look, just to give you a recent example of a guy who just left, Harry Reid never had a real job his entire life.
Right.
He talked all the time about how dirt poor he was growing up. How is he now a multimillionaire?
Right.
I mean, those are the tax returns I want to see.
Well, and that's kind of my point. We also have Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the Pakistani IT guys. That whole thing got just dropped on the floor.
That thing just disappears. Yeah, that thing just disappears. Yes.
And so,
Hillary Clinton got $145 million from Russians.
Right.
And gave them 20% of our uranium. Who are we investigating for Russia collusion? Donald Trump. What are we talking about here?
Well,
this is
and
why
that's
I'm moving to Mexico.
Don't do that. And so I guess my question is, not only from a legal advice, but kind of political advice. Is he getting enough in order for his base to get larger because he is going after. I mean, look, Dianne Feinstein had a Chinese spy working for her for 20 some odd years. Where's the investigation on that one?
Exactly.
You know, you got Javier Becerra, who was part of this Pakistani IT mess, and he bailed out. And where did he go?
And
He's now the AG
of
California.
And
So
leading all these obnoxious lawsuits against
yes, and so my point is, not only does Trump need to have some good legal counsel inside and outside, but he also needs to have some real.
Well, the name for all of that stuff would be Bill Barr, the new AG, Attorney General. That's the guy that needs to, investigate the Clintons and investigate Dianne Feinstein and investigate Becerra and investigate the Pakistani IT team. It's Jesus Department purview, and that. And again, I would start with Trump saying something like, "Why aren't you investigating the Pakistani IT team? Why are you investigating me with no evidence? We have plenty of evidence on the Pakistani IT team.
Yes.
Why aren't you investigating that?"
If we just mentioned those few, Seton, I would argue there's probably 24 more things that we don't know about. If you trot on over to the House Oversight Government Reform Committee website, we have no idea of the cases.
And by the way, just to show you how weak the Republicans are, we just ran the House for 2 years. Where was the IT investigation? Where was the Dianne Feinstein investigation? We still run the Senate. Why aren't we investigating Dianne Feinstein's 25-year Chinese spy? These guys are idiots. These guys are pathetic. It's why I'm moving to Mexico.
Well, I guess we're at a.
By the way, is anyone in Mexico debating how many genders there are? No. Go ahead.
Yeah, or debating the fact that they're going to become more economically competitive than the United States because we've got a Green New Deal that's on the table.
Yeah. Which, by the way, to McConnell's credit, he's actually bringing to a vote this month, which is very smart.
I agree with you. I just did a interview with the Competitive Enterprise Institute on that very topic.
Who was it from CEI?
It was Marlow Lewis.
I know Marlow very well. He's a good dude.
Very remarkable presentation that he made. I'm frustrated. I'm very frustrated with the whole Trump operation because I think that, we hear this counterintelligence investigation that happened at the FBI. Well, let's do a counter investigation operation on some of these Democrats. If you want to fight fire with fire and then go back to the whole thing of drain the swamp, let's start doing it and let's start blindsiding.
That was my repeated social media joke forever. When they first started the Mueller investigation, that you'd find out that more stuff about Hillary Clinton in Russia. You'd find out more stuff about somebody else in Russia. And I said, I just post the articles and say everyone in Washington D.C. is guilty of colluding with Russia except Donald Trump. I mean, it was everybody. One
of the big ones that really left the headlines was Hillary's operation with bringing the Russian what was it? IT operation to Silicon Valley, Skolkovo.
Right.
And I want an investigation on that because I have a feeling we only know about the amount of a deck chair in the Titanic with regard to Skolkovo. So, how much influence do you have in the halls of Congress that you can go knock on some doors and say, hey?
It's the whole. You got a couple major problems. You got a two-tier justice system. If you're a Democrat or deep state member, you don't get investigated. And the one party that's supposed to be in charge of these things and making hay where the system is not, it's the Republicans, and they're not doing it. So at some point, it's Trump and two other guys, Kellyanne Conway and his son Donald Trump Jr., and that's it. That's the extent of the insurgent operation to try to fix all this. And it's just, I'm afraid it may be too much in too many directions.
I think there's an awful lot that is kind of dropped on the floor here that we need to resurrect. And if he's not going to use the arrows that are in his quiver, meaning President Trump, we need to mobilize ourselves and, maybe perhaps start tweeting back to the White House going, hey, let's light this candle and then let's light, these 7 more over here. And it's not that I'm particularly afraid.
Jeff Sessions has been investigating all this stuff for a year and a half.
Well, come to find out that little Mr. Andrew McKay was also investigating Jeff Sessions.
Yeah. It's just we're being. I feel like Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid, at the end of the movie. You open the door and there's 9,000 guys shooting at you from every direction. It's really hard. And
when you look at these Democratic presidential candidates that have already thrown their hat in the ring here, I would say that we have some real big work to do. I'm fine with, the candidates that are out there so far because I don't think they're scary. But I don't want them to be able to mobilize some sector of the population that we haven't necessarily considered yet. I'm glad that President Trump brought up the whole socialism thing. I think he needs to drive that point home, and continue to do it every day. But there's a whole lot of other work. We got to go back to drain the swamp.
My saving grace on 2020 is any Democrat that would have a remote chance of defeating Trump in the general will not be able to get out of the primary.
Okay, I like it.
I mean, anyone not insane is not going to win the primary. They're not.
That's a good point. It's a very good point. Well said.
If somehow they resurrected Scoop Jackson. I mean, look, 4 years ago, Jim Webb ran from Virginia, the senator, who was pretty left wing, but he was sensible in some ways.
Sensible, yeah.
And he could barely get on the stage with 3 candidates. They almost didn't let him on the stage.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, give Mr. Seton Motley a big round of applause, and please go visit lessgovernment.org. He does some great work. Thank you, Seton, for being with us. And ladies and gentlemen, we enjoyed having you along for the ride, and we'll see you again very soon.
Hey, Donna, Cowboy Logic Radio listeners love law enforcement.
That's right, Don. And Charity Magnets designs and produces beautiful, high-quality products for law enforcement supporters and enthusiasts.
They've got very impressive honor badge car magnets.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got license plate honor badges.
CharityMagnets.com.
They've got cool keychains and license plate frames.
CharityMagnets.com. I'm on their website right now, and this is my favorite, the Honor Badge dog tag. Look at that little doggy with the dog tag. He's so cute.
Donna, we're trying to do an ad read, and you're playing around on their website, which happens to be CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute.
Donna.
Okay. Hey, this is huge, too. For each sale, a donation will be made to Cops for Kids with Cancer. Cops for Kids with Cancer has given more than $2.5 million in donations. Yes.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Like Donna is doing right now, go to CharityMagnets.com.
But he's so cute. All right, use the promo code MOJO for $5 off any purchase. I know you all love and support our brave law enforcement professionals and their families. Show your support today by going to CharityMagnets.com and check out that little puppy. He's so cute. Hey, Don, can we go to the pound, get another rescue dog, please? Pretty
No,
please?
Donna, no. 5 rescue dogs are enough, but I'm going to CharityMagnets.com, and I'm making some purchases right now.
Become a Blue Honor Foundation member today. Enter MOJO at checkout and get $5 off. CharityMagnets.com.